Hi, my name is Simon Green. I'm a cloud engineer working for Juniper Networks, and in this first video I'm going to show you how to deploy a Contrail SDN controller cluster in HA into AWS, Amazon's public cloud. In the following video we'll add a VPC with some minions to act as compute in a Kubernetes cluster. So we're going to be using AWS CloudFormation to deploy the infrastructure. We're deploying into Frankfurt, but you can certainly change that and all of the other parameters. I'd suggest that on first run, just use the defaults, go with the instructions on the video, and then when you've seen it work, just play and tweak as you like. So we're deploying 3 availability zones in Frankfurt. In the first availability zone, we're deploying a Contrail Command instance. This is a management device for Contrail, and it exposes an API, a GUI. We also use it for controlled management access to itself and also through it in order to reach the 3 controllers. And then in each availability zone we have one Contrail controller EC2 instance. You'll see there's actually flags in the stack for turning off high availability. If you turn off high availability, you'll just get this AZ. So these 3 Contrail controller EC2 instances are essentially CentOS 7s, little bit of Linux config under the hood, which you'll see in the stack itself, but then it's Contrail Command that's going to configure these for us, turn them into an SDN cluster, and then we're going to ask it to add a Kubernetes master at the same time. So we have a network load balancer. We're just using this at the moment to access the Kubernetes API across the 3 clusters. And then of course an internet gateway, so we use this for the controlled OEM access into Contrail Command. We also use it to allow the controllers and the Contrail Command instance outbound access to internet to pick up software, reach Juniper's Docker repos for example. Of course, if you want to control this more, you could always move that software into a private repo within your VPC. Okay, so I've logged into my AWS account. You can see I've selected region Frankfurt because that's the default region for the stack. It can be changed. So I currently have no EC2 instances running. I have a bit of an instruction sheet here that we'll run through. Again, I'll give you a QR code to point to that on internet at the end, so no need to take notes. So we have a couple of prerequisites. So obviously you need an AWS account, you need to be logged into it. You're going to need an SSH key pair in order to reach these instances, assuming you want to SSH into them. So if you have a key already, just set it as a parameter. You'll see the parameter in the stack in a moment. If you don't have a key, it'll look for Contrail key as the default. So if you want to use the default, you're going to have to go into EC2 and create an SSH key with the name Contrail key. We're going to use CentOS 7 free AMIs for this test deployment. So you're going to need to accept the T's and C's of that AMI. If you don't do that, you'll get an error, and the error is pretty clear, and it's going to say you need to go to this link and accept the T's and C's for the AMI before you can use it. You're also going to need a user and a password on Juniper's Docker Hub. So that's hub.juniper.net/Contrail. The stack uses this in order to grab the software for Contrail SDN and to deploy it. So your Juniper sales rep, Juniper SE, those are the sort of people that can get you those details. When you're all done, you can just click on the launch stack. I'm going to paste the link over here. So the stacks are kept on S3. So you can see if I had have clicked the launch stack, it would have taken me here and it would have picked up the S3 address for the Contrail high availability deployer. So we're going to click next, changing nothing. So you can see the defaults are pretty much all set up for you. About the only thing you're going to have to populate is the username and the password for your Juniper registry access. So my login details are obviously obscured. You're going to have to use your own. So you can see we're using Contrail's latest tag from the registry. So it's the latest release. Again, as new releases come out, you can change the tag and it will download a later image. You can also see that we've specified default parameters for things like the subnets, the availability zones, the instance types, whether we want to deploy Contrail Command However, we want to deploy 3 AZs in HA. If you set that to false, it will just deploy 1 AZ with a single instance. So all of these are changeable, but what I'd recommend is go with the defaults first time. So a couple of things to consider. We have a default password. Again, you can change it to any password you like. And user location. So these are the IP addresses that are allowed to connect to Contrail Command over internet. So it's a good idea to change this to a /32 and lock it down a bit. So let's do that. So I'll go to Google. What's my IP? This is my current IP address. I'll go back to the stack and I'm going to change the default to just me as a /32. Now I'll be the only person who can SSH into the Contrail Command security group. You can always update the security group later. Okay, so let's click next. Again, no changes. We'll go next. It's ready to deploy. And let's create the stack. So our stack's completed. You can see create complete on the left. You'll find CloudFormation stacks are very reliable. So you know if it works once, it's going to work every time. So of interest, if you click the Outputs tab, it's going to tell you all the different ways to get into these instances. So you're going to see, for example, that to get to Contrail Command, you need to use the EC2 key that you created or the key that you specified. And if we want to go through to the controllers, we're still using the public IP address of Contrail Command, but it's basically doing a trick in IP tables, and it's natting us on through the private network to the 3 controller nodes, and that's just so that they don't have to be exposed to internet directly. So right at the top here you can see this is the URL to reach Contrail Command. So let's go take a look. So it takes 1-2 minutes after the stack completes for Contrail Command to build fully. Have a cup of coffee, give it a couple of minutes. So when you're initially greeted in Contrail Command, there are no clusters because we haven't built anything yet. But I'm going to put in admin Contrail 123, which is the default password. You can always change it. And I'm going to log in. So on the Contrail Command GUI, we're going to click Credentials. And we're going to add a credential for logging in to our instances. So I don't know if you recall, but in our stack we specified a default password, which is this string here. So if you change the password, you're going to have to change it here as well. Now we need to just add our 3 servers. So all we're really doing here is pointing Contrail Command to 3 servers that are already running because of our CloudFormation stack that we just deployed in AWS. And it's going to do the rest of the configuration for us. That's server 1, controller 2. The IP addresses are static. You can change them. They're parameters in the CloudFormation stack. That's server 2. And here's SDN controller 3. Okay, servers are added, so let's click next. So this is Cloud Manager. It's going to ask you some questions about how you want your cluster deployed. Contrail Cloud's an OpenStack deployment, so we just leave this as Contrail Enterprise Multi-Cloud. We need to give it a name. Again, I'll just follow the instructions that we'll give you at the end and copy paste. You can see here is where we're pointing to Juniper's registry. And again, we're going to need the login password details for your hub.juniper.net/Contrail Docker registry. In this case, I'll use my credentials and I'll obscure them in the video. Okay, so we need to specify the Contrail version that we want to deploy. This is the latest version of Contrail. The provisioner type, it's Ansible. This is the default. For the domain, give it the AWS region domain. So in our case, we deployed in central-1. You can get this just by logging into an instance and typing hostname. NTP, well, AWS kindly provide an NTP service, so let's use it. And for the default vRouter gateway, we just give it the first IP address in the subnet that this instance is deployed in. So encapsulated priority, so Contrail SDN can support lots of different sorts of tunnels. I'd recommend MPLS over UDP as your first choice, and that's because if you do want to stretch out to AWS, GCP, Azure, UDP traffic's always going to be passed. GRE traffic in some public clouds will be dropped. Okay, and then next, so it's asking us here which nodes are going to be SDN controllers. Well, it's going to be all three, and I'd like them to be highly available. And which orchestrator do we want? Do we want OpenStack? No, not in public cloud. We'll do a Kubernetes cluster and we'll stick the master on the same nodes. Compute nodes, so let's not do the computes yet. We'll deploy another stack with another VPC just for computes later on. So let's skip it. Service nodes, this is to do with breakout to QFXs, so we're not going to use it. AppFormix nodes, we're not going to use it. Here's the summary, and let's tell it to provision. And it's going to take 5 or 6 minutes, and then it's going to say completed, and again plus 1 more minute before you actually see everything up and stable in the GUI. Okay, so we've cut the video just to save you 5 minutes, so you can see that Contrail Command's finished the deployment. We would expect this to always be successful. However, if you do want to debug, it's got some hints down the bottom, and you just run these inside the instance itself. So if we go to our instructions, we're basically here. We click provision, we gave it 5-6 minutes, it finished successfully, and it says that it's going to redirect us to log into the cluster. So proceed to login. So we'll get the same login screen, but this time you'll see there's a cluster that you can select, and again default login password admin Contrail123 because we didn't change it. When you log in, you're going to see a dashboard something like this. So keep in mind it can take a few minutes for Contrail, the UI and everything to come up and be steady and ready to log in and see this view. So if you log in and find that you're not getting a graphic, a good hint, give it a few minutes. In this case, just to avoid problems with browser cache, I even switched over to Safari. Just gave it the same URL, pasted it in, logged in, and there you go. So of course what it's showing us at the moment is that we don't have any compute nodes. That's quite correct, we haven't added them yet. We're going to do that in the next video. But we have an HA cluster of 3 Contrail nodes. And we also asked it to deploy a kube master, so it would have done that on the 3rd node. So if you think back to the CloudFormation stack, it was giving you some instructions down the bottom for how to log into all the nodes. So let's log into node 3 and just take a little look at what's going on. So the key here is going to be the key that got downloaded when you added your EC2 SSH key. So that was Contrail key or your own key. So mine's kept in downloads. Okay, so we've jumped into the host. I can sudo over to bash, and if I ask for a status on Contrail, now we've already seen it in the dashboard so we know it's okay, but if I ask in command line, it's going to go off and it's going to fetch that Docker container because it wasn't loaded currently, and then it will give me a status, and you can see it tells me all the containers are running and the controller, analytics, active, all good. If I do a get nodes, it tells me I have 3 controllers and they're ready. So in the next video, we're going to add a VPC for the minions, for the computes. We'll peer it into the controllers. We'll get Contrail Command to configure them, and then we can deploy some test apps.